welcome back to When IT Hits the Fan. First episode in our new dedicated little studio space. Very excited to actually have a corner and not have the background change with every single episode. Today we have Matt Watkins with us. Thank you so much for joining.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
Sure. So yeah, Matt Watkins. I'm Chief Information Officer at IMA Financial. IMA is mostly an insurance broker. We do a little bit of wealth management and advisory services as well, but for the most part, an insurance broker. We've been here about 3 years now.
Absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey into IT leadership?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to make it as brief as possible. It's funny. I got into IT probably the way a lot of people do, kind of by chance. When I was in college, I decided I was going to be a business major, and mostly because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And so, as I sat in class my sophomore year, they had a guest speaker come in, and they started talking about a new major that was out there called Computer Information Systems that they were going to launch. And at that point, I had decided, well, I don't really want to be an accountant. Probably don't want to be an econ major. I always had an interest in technology and where it was going, and I saw that as kind of the future of business. So I said, hey, this makes a lot of sense, and switched over to that major. But as I graduated college and really started working in the field, and I started off at a consulting shop, I soon realized I didn't want to just be super technical, like a network admin or just a programmer or anything like that. I really wanted to still stay connected to the business. So working with the business to understand what were their problems, how do we use IT and technology to solve those, and keeping my technical skills up, but still staying close to the business side of things. And so I was really intentional about that throughout my career, and got to kind of hone that skill in consulting. And then from there, I decided I really wanted to experience multiple areas of IT, so that as I became a leader, I would know how the different parts of IT work together and how they worked alongside the business. And so I did everything from data and analytics to some network roles to enterprise architecture, project management, kind of all across the board. And then eventually into more leadership roles, and eventually into to leading all of IT.
That's excellent. And in a moment, I'll transition into you like to stay on the cutting edge, and I want to get a bit of your predictions for the future of what's coming down the pike. It's been a big 2 years that feel like a couple of decades in how quick tech is moving. But going back just for
Agreed.
a second, you've worked across multiple industries in their IT fields. What are some universal technological challenges that you've seen on your different teams?
Yeah, it's interesting because every industry I find thinks they are unique and different, and they're not totally wrong. There are differences and different challenges in every industry, and so it's important to learn that industry. But I would tell you, every industry I've been in is solving a couple of the same things, at least within the past, kind of 5 to 10 years, and that is how do they do more with their data, whether that's
Yeah.
analytics or using it to automate things, or just how do they mine and use that data.
Yeah.
The second is how are they using technology to improve both the client experience with their client or customer, as well as making internal associates more efficient. So again, you think automation, you think even AI that's coming now. We see that taking off in a big way to make people more efficient. Um, but those things are across the board, right? In every industry, how they apply them to the industry is slightly different, and so that's why I say it's important to know the industry. But I do think the technology challenges are very similar.
Absolutely. And I always have a rule that I can't say the word AI first. I can imply it, but guest has to say it first. But now the bell has been rung and we can enter into that subject. Um,
It didn't take me long.
no, it never takes anyone very long these days. But yes, talking about both data and automation and improving efficiency. AI. What do you think that AI's role is right now in improving efficiency in data heavy organizations? Are there any specific AI applications that have been proving more valuable in your conquests of such a thing? Go ahead.
Yeah, I see right now AI is a tool that enhances people work people's work or makes them more efficient, right? So I always equate it to it's like the modern day calculator, right? Like, it used to take a really long time to do math, write it down on a paper, the calculator solved that. I think AI is taking that to the next level and really helping people find information, helping them produce documentation and content. It is helping summarize things or do things that were very transactional in the past, and we see that, and we see it at IMA, right? Of helping to write sales emails or helping to get information out of static documents or do document comparisons and analysis. We have a lot of static documents like insurance policy and claims that come through in PDF that we've used AI to extract information out and compare that information and then go do something with that information. And it's been really effective at that. We haven't seen where it's at a point where it's going to replace people just yet,
Yes.
of course, but it is making them much more effective in my experience.
Yes, as naive as it might be, I tend to be of the opinion that in the same way that the internet didn't replace teachers, AI isn't exactly coming for all of us just yet. We did a big article recently on the Rhyno website where we were looking into multiple of these fantastic new medical AIs tools that are coming out. And they aren't going to replace radiologists, but they can see things that the human eye can't, and at speeds that in a world of provider burnout, let's say, it's just invaluable. But speaking of AI in a medical setting, AI governance, ooh, spooky. It's a big challenge balancing both innovation, security, compliance, and also the ethical considerations of training data that isn't biased, making sure that patient data stays and isn't sold to the best AI brain, the biggest bidder. What practices have you, in your expertise, been implying? What have you found that has worked well?
Yeah, we've found a couple things to be really effective. The first for and foremost, I believe that all AI right now needs a human in the loop. So a human's got to be involved to check things and make sure it makes sense and it's free from errors and to the extent possible free of bias and those sorts of things. So I do think that that's the biggest piece right now. And we've had internal associates that are nervous about, well, how can I trust what it's producing? And we always go back to you have to check that. You have to fact check that just as you would getting information off the internet or from another person. The other for us is we are really careful about where that data is going. So if we are using proprietary data, sensitive data,
Yeah.
client data, that we are doing that in internal tools that are protected and private and not used to go train other models and those sorts of things. We allow people to go use the general large language models out there, the chat GPTs of the world, but we have been very serious about saying there's nothing non-public that can go into those models, right? You can use it to ask questions and get some general answers, but as soon as it's proprietary information, it goes into our internal kind of walled off large language models. And then when we review contracts with vendors, so the Microsofts and the Salesforces of the world, we are very careful about what are they doing with that data, and we do a pretty thorough cyber review and compliance review to make sure that data is not being used more broadly to train models or available to other organizations.
Absolutely. And if I may, do you have any concrete examples of AI that you're currently implementing? For example, I've heard places that are focusing more on the internal automation, saving hours within the company. I've heard other places that are more customer facing or patient facing, where the AI can help you find out whether, oh, you've got a nail in your hand. Is that an ER or a urgent care problem? What are you guys implementing right now?
So all of our stuff is internally focused right now. Eventually, I do believe we'll get to the client facing component of that.
Yeah.
But we've said, okay, let's use it internally and really make sure it works and we understand it and our data is clean before we go, turn that loose on customers. So we've used it for a couple of things. We have an internal tool called Ask IMA. And Ask IMA is basically our own private version of OpenAI that we use to feed information, so documents, eventually our data lake and data warehouse, and information from our systems. And associates are using that for a couple of things. One is just to find information, right? Of what kind of business do we write? Who are our clients? how should I pitch a new client based on IMA's values and what we offer and those sorts of things. And then we are using it for, like I mentioned, some of that document analysis and comparing documents and analyzing where a policy may have gaps in coverage, for example, or analyzing if a claim is covered by a policy and comparing those two documents to really get that answer. The other place we're using it internal to IT is really on code reviews and in some cases producing some code. And so we have found that makes our developers much more efficient and allows them to focus on kind of more bigger kind of strategic projects and almost brings everyone to that kind of senior software developer capability, which has been fantastic and out of just code reviews and troubleshooting and all those sorts of things.
Absolutely. And moving a little bit from AI into other sections of your position, application rationalization. Many companies struggle with tech sprawl. And I'm wondering if, especially after acquisitions and rapid growth, I'm wondering if there's any strategies or best practices that you can share when it comes to application rationalization, which, just for the audience, we define that as making sure that your application portfolio isn't soggy, flabby, a little bit overpopulated. What would you say?
Yeah, so we do quite a few acquisitions or partnerships every year, and that definitely contributes to that tech sprawl, right? We see a lot of overlapping applications and redundancies and those sorts of things. So we focus on that a lot, and we focus on it because every dollar we save there is a dollar we can reinvest in innovation and things like AI and moving that forward without increasing the overall IT budget. And so that's been our philosophy and strategy now for the past couple of years of how do we take those costs out and reinvest them somewhere else. Where we have been successful is a couple of areas. One is really helping our business stakeholders to understand the challenges it creates of having redundant or overlapping technologies. Not just from a cost perspective, but a productivity perspective. People don't know what to use for what. The tools may not work well together, and so now we've kind of walled off parts of the organization that can't work well together. But we have also, taken to our business leaders, here's the cost involved of these overlapping applications. So if we have, multiple productivity tools, or we have even multiple AI tools in some cases, here's the cost involved in that. And is that additional tool really driving more revenue for our business or some great productivity, or is it just people prefer it and they're used to it? And that really helps us drive that conversation, and then we can look at how do we rationalize those and those sorts of things. The other for us is just educating people on what do we have, right? The tools that are out there, what they're good at, what technology we're developing internally. Because without that, then people assume we don't have something in a particular space, and so they're going out to find it and procure things on their own and bring new technology in that maybe overlaps with something we already have today. So we've been very intentional about advertising our application list, our capabilities list, what should be used for what, and then being open and honest about where we have potential gaps.
Absolutely. And however, I think sometimes that companies can go a little too Spartan with it. I think things can get a little bit too dry for multiple reasons. One, I think there maybe could be some room for experimentation in the tech stack, as well as innovation, trying new things, trying to save ROI by spending money to save money. Also, there's in security, there might be some benefits to having either duplicates or some sort of, if this application falls, we have one standing up behind it. Do you have any best practices when it comes to trying to find a balance between obviously saving as much money for the corporation as possible, because that translates to savings directly to the patients, but also making sure that there's enough toys in the toy box for both when the worst happens, but also when the best happens?
Yes, and that is a difficult balance to get right for sure. So we have several resources, some in IT and some not, that are really focused on innovation and pilots and the experimentation piece that you mentioned. So in that group, they are getting requests from the business stakeholders on either a new capability or technology they heard about or someone that approached them. And if we don't have something that's a direct match, we are doing small proof of concepts or pilots in the business to prove out what value does it have, right? Are people going to use it? Does it create some sort of efficiency, or does something for our clients that we can't do today? And in a lot of cases, that is yes. And they are small, quick proof of concepts and pilots, fairly inexpensive. But as soon as we have the results of that and everyone feels good about it, then we look to scale it. So then we bring in the rest of IT to say, how do we integrate it? How do we scale it? How are we going to support it? How are we going to do all those things? So we've kind of bifurcated the team to say, okay, we're going to have part focus on that, just experimentation, see what's out there, and see if there's something better than we have today. And they are not constrained to the same things of the rest of IT, where we're looking for those overlaps and redundancies and cost savings.
Absolutely. And speaking of, I always ask these sorts of questions to IT, C-suite, as high as it goes. Sometimes there is issues, but in translation, I call them translation errors between hands-on keyboard people and then the more governance side of, let's say, the power of the purse. How do you maintain agility and innovation and also just communication between these two arms of the same body when it comes to implementing necessary governance and making sure that the business side is on board with everything, but also making sure that our local code monkeys are happy and fed?
Yeah, and it's been interesting in IMA because we are very intentional about not becoming a big bureaucratic company that has process and governance for the sake of process and governance. So the first thing we do is anytime we're implementing new governance or process, we ask ourselves the question of, are we doing this because it solves a problem or creates value for the business? Or are we doing it because all big companies do this? And we've read an article that said you should have this IT governance or this process. And it really causes us to think, and myself included, right? Because I've put things in place at other companies just because that's what you do, versus really looking at, is it creating value or not? But the way that we're getting those two groups to really talk is, we do have meetings where they come together and we review everything that's in the innovation pipeline, and then we review everything that's in the either governance side, or places we're looking to reduce redundancies or save costs, or whatever, making sure that the two groups are talking and have visibility to one another, I think is the key. And that way, when we're starting some of those pilots and doing some of those experiments, the rest of the team has insight into that, so they can start thinking about, how is this going to work? What problems are we going to run into from a governance standpoint eventually if we want to scale it and do this more broadly? And that seems to be mostly effective. But even with that, I would say the two sides are at odds a little bit. And I think there is some healthy tension that should happen there, because they push each other, right? The governance side is pushing on, hey, let's make sure we're not taking unnecessary risks and doing things we shouldn't do. The innovation side is really pushing the rest of IT and technology folks on, hey, we should think about what else is possible, or think about how we do this differently.
Absolutely. You're right that there should be a push and pull between innovation and stability. And I think sometimes either side can forget that, and when they can be working together, that's when it works best for everybody. Um, in all of the tech noise, especially with how much many applications, how many software, how much hardware, it's all coming out so quickly these days. How do you keep your teams ahead of the curve of rapidly changing in this rapidly changing digital landscape? That includes both, how do you select what points to move toward, but also how do you deal with tech debt? How do you deal with the fact that as soon as you stand something up, it's already old?
Yeah, and that's we've really seen that in the last 18 months, right? With
Yeah.
the introduction of AI and some other new technologies, of that pace of change is getting faster and faster. And I'd probably say that every year, but this year we've really felt it. And so we do a couple of things to keep the team upskilled and know what's out there. First is, a large part of the team has dedicated time that we take out of kind of the resource allocation to say, go do training, go attend a webinar, right? Uh, Look at release notes, see what's coming, see what's out there. The other is, for a lot of these newer areas, like when AI first hit, we do bring in contractors or consultants or others outside help,
Yeah.
to help us educate us and build things, and our team builds alongside them and learns alongside them, to the point they can take it over, and then the consultants or contractors go away until we have another need for them. But it's allowed our team to do that really hands-on training
Yeah.
while building out something that's valuable to the organization. So that's been really exciting for us. But it is an area I think we're going to have to take a hard look at and say, how do we do even more of that in the future? Because I don't think we've gotten the balance quite right of people's just day jobs versus really focusing on that innovation and staying current.
Absolutely. And moving away from our wonderful subject matter expertise session, which is always actually my favorite part of the show, but I also like to talk a little bit more about the human side of having a career, of being a person who has a
Sure.
job for decades. If you could send one piece of advice back to yourself at the beginning of your career, what might it be? What is your best piece of hard won wisdom? I'd love if there's more than one, but what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Wow, yeah, that's a good one. The first thing that comes to mind for me is having more confidence and taking more risks. Right,
Yeah.
when you start out in your career, there's a lot you don't know, of course, and a lot you have to learn. But I also think the younger generations that are coming into the workforce have a lot of great ideas that we haven't thought about because we're used to the status quo, and but people are afraid to challenge when they're new in their career. And I wish I would have done more of that because I think there was a lot of opportunity for that and a lot of things that I walked away thinking, oh, I wish I would have pushed for that sooner. And so just having the confidence to do that. And I always appreciate new folks coming onto our team that will do that, even sit with me and challenge me on what are we doing in the right way, of course. But we get a lot of new ideas that way.
Yeah. And I know that there's never any one secret sauce, but when it comes to longevity and surviving and growing and being promoted within our field, what are some of the best things that a person just starting in our field could do to better themselves, to put themselves on the track to lead as far as they could possibly go?
I think it's being that constant learner, and not just on technology, but learning the business and the problems that we're trying to solve. I encourage everyone, go sit down with an account executive or go sit down with a salesperson. Really understand what they do on a day to day basis. Right. One, you're going to build some great relationships. You might get some mentorship out of it. You'll build trust within the business. But two is you'll really understand how that business operates and where technology can solve a problem. I think we get so caught up in we're doing technology for technology's sake. And AI is a great example. Everyone wants to do AI because
Yeah.
everyone feels like they need to go do AI, but we got to still go back to what problem are we solving and what impact does it have on the people that we're deploying it to. And I think sitting with them and getting to know them goes a long way in that.
Absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your expertise. It just means the world. And so this has been another episode of When IT Hits the Fan, brought to you by Rhino Healthcare Solutions. Please follow us on LinkedIn. Matt, is there any place that people can connect with you online?
The easiest place is on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Reach out to me, make a connection. Happy to connect and have a conversation.
Yeah. And so thank you again, and thank you for watching. And we'll be back next week with another great mind.